Question: what separates a great podcast from the average? Let's talk about it. What's up, pod influencers? My name is Ozeal, and I want to welcome you to the Podcast Influence YouTube channel, where I help you amplify your influence with podcasting. On this channel, I'm going to share with you tips, insights, and strategies on how to pro up your podcast with style and influence. And today we're going to tackle the question: what makes a great podcast? What makes that one podcast, that big Joe Rogan, that maybe Expert Armchair, some of these big podcasts, true crime podcasts, separate themselves away from their competitors? So today I'm going to break down 5 things that I see great podcasts really crush and really stand out versus the ones that are struggling in really gaining an audience. So I'm ready. I'm excited because this is something that I get asked a lot is, Ozeal, what can I do to make my podcast stand out? I'm having trouble marketing my podcast. I'm not building. And frankly, I want to be honest with you. Sometimes, I talk about this before. It's either your branding or marketing is off in regards to really garnering an audience. But one of the things that I do see that great podcasts have are very similar in the things that really stand out versus the ones that don't. And maybe you're struggling with getting an audience because there's some things that you're missing. And I think it's always important to do a podcast audit or get somebody who can give you some honest feedback, like a coach. I can do that for you. That can really help you tweak some things in getting your podcast from good to great. One thing that I do see great podcasts do versus the average is great podcasts have clarity. Whether it's on the branding side, usually it's the branding, but that translates into their marketing. So being clear about what your mission is and answering the question, who are you going to serve? Like, what is this podcast about? And who is your audience? What are you going to help them with? Are you entertaining them with something? Are you bringing value, being informative? Are you educating them? But being very specific and being clear about your podcast can really help you make that breakthrough in garnering that audience that we are all searching for, right? At the end of the day, we're not trying to podcast for a company of one, right? We're really trying to build an audience of a company of a few, and a few that matter. And part of that is clarity. So you want to make sure that you look at your branding, you look at the title of your show, and then you also get super clear about who you are going to serve. I think having clarity will definitely separate you from the average and your competitors, because I see a lot of podcasts out there that are within a genre and the branding is off. There's really no clear message and they're just pretty much talking about everything to everybody. And you are not going to create a great podcast, a remarkable podcast that way. So get clear on your podcast. Number 2 is individuality, right? Personality. The great podcasts have a personality. They have a vibe. Remember, your vibe attracts your tribe. So when I see podcasts that are really crushing it, I've actually even seen podcasts that are like with the host is like super monotone, but they're very educational, they're very informative, they're very insightful, and that could be attractive, right? That could be a vibe they're trying to attract, that intellectual side of the podcast. So, but having personality is something that you definitely need to have, and really, and that takes some time, right? Sometimes a lot of us, maybe this is the first time launching a podcast, so it takes time for you to get comfortable as a podcast host. I get that. I was like that as well. But I think having a personality and really developing and being conscious of it, right? And really developing a style is something that you should be aware of. And moving forward, I think, that personality is what's going to really attract that bigger audience, So one of the things that I do see with great podcasts is that they do have a style, the host, that they have personality. You look at, the Howard Sterns, the, Larry King, bless his soul, may he rest in peace, and some of the other great broadcasters. All that translates to our world of podcasting. They all have a style of whether it's interviewing or whether it's speaking, articulating a message. So personality is definitely tip number 2 and something you should definitely assess. And maybe you can tweak a few things, to help you develop that into your podcast greatness. Number 3 is relevance. Okay. Is your podcast relevant to what's happening? And I think the beauty when you see great podcasts, they're creating relevant content. I think, you're evolving as a podcaster, and but it's important to be able to make sure that you are listening to what your audience is searching for, right? For example, let's say if you have a podcast that's centered around health and wellness, right? Paying attention to the trends, okay? Paying attention to some of the things that are trending in the online world, and picking up those topics and just creating episodes or finding experts to talk about that, to get your take on it, to have other experts talking about some of the things that are going on. So I think whether in any industry, you should have a sense of what's currently happening, what's trending, and being able to infuse that with the content you're dishing out today. So relevance is a key component to really having a successful, remarkable podcast, is making sure that your content is not outdated. Because let's face it, you want to grow your audience, and your audience is searching. So if you can just say, hey, listen, I'm creating the content that you're searching for, boom, it's a beautiful marriage, and they're going to appreciate and love you for that. So relevancy is definitely a key to having a remarkable podcast. And number 4, a remarkable podcast is a podcast that has a host that anticipates what the audience needs or what they may be searching for. So getting ahead of the game. Okay, so for example, one of the things that could happen for, like, let's say a podcaster, right? Let's say myself, is jumping on and seeing the wave of Clubhouse and seeing how, some of the social audio app Clubhouse, really jumping on there and figuring out, okay, what type of content can I create that can help podcasters or other people that are trying to use Clubhouse for their social media, for building their audience, their gain, right? And creating content and anticipating that this is going to be a thing. Let me create content because people are going to be searching for. Now, sometimes, I may be wrong. I may just not even do it. And I've made a big mistake of not jumping on the trends as quick as possible. But I've noticed that a lot of the great podcast hosts are really great at anticipating the audience needs way before they even need them. So that's something for you to consider, is what can you anticipate? What are the things that you can serve your audience? That's what's going to make your podcast amazing and remarkable if you become that authority, that cool, podcast host that's on top of the game and delivering the news, the goods way before they even think about it. So, and numero 5, last but not least, this is a big one, and this is one that I'm really passionate about. To have a remarkable, great podcast, this one thing that I do see that great podcast hosts have versus the average is interviewing. Just having better interviewing skill set, chops, and really understanding what it is. Now, don't get me wrong. It takes time to be an interviewer. I've said this numerous times in this channel that, there's a lot of people that have not gone to broadcasting school or journalism. That's not in your background, right? You just want to pick up the mic and just share. And that's great, but you have to be mindful of that. This is a skill set. And if you have an interview-based podcast, I think it serves you well to be able to invest in how can I become a better interviewer, and listening to the greats, listening to people that have great podcasts that you listen to, and really taking from that and figuring out how you can add that to your podcast. So interviewing is a skill set. And I've noticed that if I hear a podcast and I see there's, personality, right? There's relevance, there's all that, right? And then I hear them interview and it's just kind of like, but here's the good news. You can tweak that. You can tweak that and get better at it, but just being mindful of it, right? Because if that podcast host has all the other components, but they're not mindful of the lack of the skill set they don't have, that could be a problem. That could be a problem for the podcast long-term wise. So you want to make sure that you're aware of your strengths and weaknesses. And for many of us, interviewing didn't come natural, but it definitely takes some time and having some mindfulness of what can I do to become a better interviewer, because the best podcasts that I've heard, especially the interview-based podcasts, are the ones that really have their interviewing chops down. So I think that's pretty much it, guys. Let me know in the comments section down below what you thought, some of the takeaways, some of the things, you may agree or disagree with me on. I will love to hear from you nonetheless. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel for weekly Thursday content and hit that like button, apparently give me some love, and also hit the notification button to be first in line for all the content. I believe I mentioned that. Okay. If not, just do that. Okay. Hit the notification button. Let's stay in touch. And again, as always, everything is linked up down below. We have Pod Houston Mastermind Group, or Podcast Influence Academy. We have our Pod Houston group, which is a Houston-based podcasting community, but it's for everybody. If you're an independent podcaster, join us. Ask your questions. I'm in there, along with other amazing independent podcasters like yourself that are looking to learn and pro up their podcast. Yeah, let's definitely stay in touch, and I look forward to seeing you on the other side. Thanks again for your support. Peace and one love.